This is just a fact of life that women have been abused and beaten and manipulated and murdered and raped so many times for so many generations since the dawn of time that it is almost ingrained in them.
I always caution men that are following these like stoic influencers that are like, you can never show vulnerability and women will leave you at the first sight.
Men that cry and are soft are not attractive. The girl leaves them and goes to another guy that knows what's going on.
Because of the way that so many men are these days, they follow people like Andrew Tate because he has money and he has women and he has these things, and for them that is inspiring. Sure, the guy's a piece of shit.
Hey, I didn't say the word listen. Did I say the word listen? Did I say the word listen?
What does it mean to be vulnerable, and specifically with a woman?
It's a fine line because so many men have expressed the truth of their heart only to have it smashed by a woman and to have it used against him.
Oh, women want a vulnerable man. They want a guy who shows weakness. They want someone who's going to be a human and show all that weakness. And then guys do that. And the woman's like, maybe we should see other people.
You're bleeding for 6 to 8 weeks after, right? Like, you're not supposed to lift anything heavier than your baby until you're done bleeding. So like, how does laundry get done or anything cleaned if the mom physically isn't able to lift anything?
And she went to him, and when she was under the influence of the medicine, he molested her.
Oh,
and
Nick, thank you so much for coming here.
thank you for having me.
You are a new father, and you were just saying you got off of 2 back-to-back retreats, so I'd imagine you are exhausted and different time zones, so I appreciate you coming in.
Yeah, it's good to be here, and the retreats are nourishing as much as they are tiring. So,
You give as much as you're getting in there.
absolutely.
Did you have a lot of the same men that did the one, like your first retreat, this visit to Texas, then they went to the second one while you were here?
Yeah, a lot of the men come back. It's one of those things where it's interesting. Some men, it's very difficult for them to get their foot in the door, and the resistance is real and strong. But once they're in, I don't think we've ever had a man come to an event and say, that was a mistake. Most men are like, fuck, that's the nourishment that I've been yearning for my entire life. So getting them in is the difficult part, but once they're in, then it's pretty easy.
What do you find is usually the thing that gets them through the door? Because there is a lot of criticism when it comes to like these male spaces, specifically around like finding masculinity or finding a healthy way to kind of father or be a husband. And some critics will say that you shouldn't need a tribe to do this, you shouldn't need a course to do this. And we see so many men that are subscribing to like, you know, like, what do you call them? Like those like, I don't want to say like the pickup artists, right? Like, so like they're like looking for these ways to kind of like get a goal that they're not achieving. And then you also have like these loud critics on the other side, like somehow you're supposed to just innately know these things, but obviously we don't, right? Otherwise we wouldn't have courses. So what is the, I guess, maybe pain point that you see that gets people from criticizing to actually being, you know, curious enough to sign up?
Women. My entry into this work came through the breakdown of my marriage and this realization that I have no idea what I'm doing. And most men, a lot of men are there, kind of their partners have said, if you do not do something, then this is done. And unfortunately, most men, we live in this society where most men do it by themselves because they don't have a network of men. They don't have good men around them. So they get to this point where they hit rock bottom, because until rock bottom, actually, it's fine. Oh, fuck, it's not. And most of the time, that's because of women. Sometimes it's illness or disease. Sometimes it's kids. But the idea that we need to do this alone is the reason that we are so damaged, because we're not meant to do it alone. We're not meant to do anything alone. And the biggest killer of men is loneliness. And what that kind of produces is these men that sit in their offices or their cellars and basements and kind of don't get out into the world, and they're single and lonely and depressed and addicted, and they cause real damage. And it's something that we're trying to kind of push back against. Like, men need men just as much as women need women. And we've had this, we grew up in tribe, like we evolved in tribe and community, and to be around good men is so nourishing. And pickup artistry is not good men. It's manipulative, and it's weak, and it's this manipulation that just kind of perpetuates loneliness and perpetuates the toxic masculine that society is so off and over. And if you're going to manipulate a woman into liking you, then at some point she's going to discover the real you, and then you're going to be back to where you started. So being around men that have been initiated into adulthood and have an emotional capacity that is not that of a child is really the only way that men can learn. And because so many men in society are uninitiated, we grow up with uninitiated fathers, we look to uninitiated men to kind of download that masculine transmission. And that's why we are in this situation we are in.
Yeah, and it seems like a bit of a caricature of what a man is supposed to be, or masculinity, and it's ultimately severely selfish too, the things that they're trying to get, and also shallow, and then they get the thing that they think is going to make them happy, and they wind up almost worse off because there's this utter disappointment from the reality they thought they were going to have versus the one that they actually finally attained. So it's like you finally catch the car, right? Like the dog chasing the car, and like, well, this isn't all I thought it was going to be. And what I see, it's like a protective mechanism. So if you're only looking at women as something that can give you something, right, and that they're disposable, and you're not actually letting them in, well, then you're not in a vulnerable space where you can actually be hurt. You're not opening up yourself to really be seen because you're terrified of actually being seen. So it's almost this self-fulfilling prophecy. And I was talking to someone, and they said that one of these really big pickup artists that was wildly successful, very rich, huge following, and it had like worked for all of these men. Well, a lot of these men ended up committing suicide because of like the utter loneliness that they would have once they acquired said women or said family, because it was all predicated on a lie. And even Neil Strauss wrote a book called The Truth, and it was after his really popular book saying like how empty he felt, and he just kind of felt addicted to chasing these women. And I always caution men that are following these like stoic influencers that are like, you can never show vulnerability, and women will leave you at the first sight of your humanity, essentially. Like, what a lonely life. And as you mentioned, loneliness is the number one predictor of an early death for everyone. Like, we're meant to experience life together. So there's so much more available if you're willing to kind of like risk it, and you have to be able to risk being hurt if you want all of the things on the other side as well. So I wanted to get into vulnerability, especially with you. So first, can you define like what does that mean or look like or feel like as a man? Like, what does it mean to be vulnerable, and specifically with a woman?
It's a fine line, because so many men have expressed the truth of their heart only to have it smashed by a woman and to have it used against him. And then that makes it tough for him to ever come back and like stick his head out of the shell again. But we have this issue that we've faced in society where we've gone from this very stoic John Wayne masculinity to this very sensitive, open, feminine, emotional version of masculinity, which is, you know, if you're looking at the shadow masculine, they're basically just opposite ends of the spectrum. So yes, it's one thing to be able to have emotional intelligence and feel what you are feeling, and then to be able to hold that and contain that in a way that you perhaps bring it to your men's group or to a therapist and not dump it on your woman, because it's not healthy. It's not healthy for a relationship. It's not healthy for her. It's not healthy for you. Whereas the vulnerability that I speak to is the revealing of the truth of your heart. And what that might mean is, hey, I'm really fucking struggling at the moment, but I'm taking care of it because I have men that support me and I have men that I can bring this to. So rather than sit on it and pretend it's not happening because I'm stoic and I'm fucking strong, and actually just acknowledging that you're struggling and that you're in pain. And if you can bring that to a group of men and they can hold you through that, the growth and the expansion and the healing that you'll go through is so powerful. As opposed to bringing that to your woman and saying, here's all my shit and I'm going to dump it on you and then you have to hold me through this. Which is just, it's going to depolarize the relationship, and if, at some point it may turn into more of a mother-child dynamic if that is the constant method of you kind of expressing yourself. So revealing the truth of your heart, and that does not mean dumping on her your emotions, but sharing with her where you're at and then actually dealing with it and not pretending that it's something that's just going to disappear if you drink a few more beers or play more video games or jerk off to porn.
So do you think the key element is ending that sentence or that share with I have a plan, or like this is manageable? So one of the big things that most men will tell me, they'll say that you can't express that you don't know, like that you're uncertain, you don't have a plan, that you're overwhelmed, or that anything is hard, because that will translate to the woman as a weakness. And even subconsciously she might just say like he's not able to protect and provide essentially, or lead. And I don't know if that's entirely true, like if you can take the whole thing at face value, or if like you need that end, like that bookend of, but I'm going to figure it out, but I have a plan.
It depends on how you show up in relationship. And if you never have it figured out and you don't have a plan and you don't have a vision, and then you come to her and you're like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, then probably that's pretty untrustable, or it just reiterates the fact that you are untrustable because you don't know what the fuck is happening. If you have a vision and you have a plan and you do the things that you say you're going to do, and you are a man of integrity that is aligned with his values and his truth, and you come to her and you say, look, I'm pretty unsure in this moment, but it's something that I'm working through and something that I'm taking care of, then that is deeply trustable. As opposed to, yeah, I've got to figure it out, but actually I don't. But it comes down to how often you do the things that you say you're going to do, and whether you are a man that is trustworthy. And yeah, I think that if the truth is that you don't know what is happening or you don't have a plan, that's okay. But it should also stir something in you that desires to have it figured out. And yeah, she should be able to trust what you say to be truth and not something that's just sounds good in the moment.
Yeah, I've tried to make this a point recently on this clip, and it went viral, and everyone took it the entire wrong way, and they were trying to say I'm trying to like domesticate men, which like, and I'm being called a feminist. I'm like, anyone who knows me, both of those things are fundamentally false. My point of like, if you say you're gonna take out the trash, do it, because like it's those little things of follow through, right? Like that is the masculine. Are you a man of integrity? Is your word your bond? Like these little things throughout the day are the thing that paint the whole picture of who you are as a man. And if I can't trust you to do this little thing, what's going to happen when the tiger shows up, right? Like I can't trust that you've got this because all of these little tests you have failed, right, by your own accord. And then the pushback on that is like, why do women have to test? And it's almost like what I see getting punished is men get punished for being men, and women are getting punished for being women, and then we complain about each other because we're not showing up as the opposite sex. So women do test, like we are like this very fluid thing, and part of that is to help like fortify the masculine, right? Like, are you sturdy? Are you reliable? Are you strong? Now there's a difference between that and like women that are neurotic, right, or that are emasculating, and that's not okay either. But it's almost like what I'm seeing, because it's always this pendulum example, is now men are saying that they actually want women to behave more like men, because like they want you to have all of your emotions like completely like bottled up, and we don't want you to be unpredictable, and we want you to kind of be this one way all of the time. So well, now you're kind of training a woman to be more in her masculine instead of accepting these emotions. And then on the flip side, in some of these like spiritual spaces that also have some issues, it's like, no, be unbridled and all crazy emotions are acceptable. It's like, no, there's always a fine balance. So yes, women have more emotions, especially based off of our cycles, but that doesn't mean you get to like dump everything onto your man in an abusive way, right? It does need to somewhat be contained. Otherwise, that is going to erode the man instead of like building him up. So everything is this delicate dance, but it's like, don't punish a woman for being a woman, and also don't punish a man for being a man, because they're going to turn into the thing that you actually don't want them to be.
Something that you said that it really didn't land for me until I had this experience where I sat in a medicine ceremony with a man and felt him deeply, like a really beautiful practitioner and server of the medicine. And a friend came to me and she's like, I'm looking to try this medicine. I'm like, this guy's amazing. Highly recommend him. And she went to him, and when she was under the influence of the medicine, he molested her.
Oh my God.
It just, it shook me in a way that I didn't ever question my safety when I was with this man, because I don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the issues with men complaining that a woman tests is that they don't realize how different we need a level of safety. Most men can walk down the street at night with their headphones in and not actually care, and not feel unsafe. Most women will never do that. They'll have one that's kind of out, so they're on a far higher alert all the time. And this is the way that we are. This is just a fact of life, that women have been abused and beaten and manipulated and murdered and raped so many times for so many generations, since the dawn of time, that it is almost ingrained in them. So they need to test to see whether or not they are safe, and see whether or not that man is actually capable of holding them and protecting them. Because if he's not, then she needs to close her heart for her own protection. And the little tests are just ways of her gauging whether or not she can fully express the truth of her heart, or whether or not she needs to close and protect herself. And the more untrustable a man is, the more closed his woman is going to be. And then suddenly, well, why isn't she more feminine? It's like, well, that's because of you. And maybe she's come in with her own kind of pathology and her own history and whatever, but that just means that you need to step up more so she can learn to trust you. And maybe you do the right thing 99 times, and there's a one time you don't do it, and that's the thing that she looks at. But that's life. And if you want your woman to be the most radiant version of herself, then you need to create a space where she feels safe enough to do so. And often, this whole idea of, I don't want you to be so emotional, it's like, you don't go down in the ocean and hope for no waves. Like, if you want the woman that is sexual and radiant and just will fuck you to God, then you need to take the emotional side of it. You need to allow her to express her entire range, not just the little slither of the range that you enjoy. And then the other part of it is, you don't need to be the mountain that takes her abuse.
Right.
Like, you can sit there and you can draw a boundary if she's uncontained and if she doesn't wash it through her heart first. No man has to sit there and receive the abuse of anybody. But then you need to be present enough and grounded enough that you don't get so triggered that you lose your ground and then you're both lost. And because basically it's the emotional state of two children that start to fight and start to argue if you lose your ground. So if you can be contained and present enough that she comes to you and she starts to get really emotional, and you just breathe deeply and maybe you put a hand on her leg, and maybe you just really bring her back down. Or maybe you say, hey, look, this is not beneficial in the moment. Let's come back in 10 minutes. Let's go for a walk. We'll take some space. We'll come back in 10 minutes, or we'll come back in 2 hours, and we'll have the conversation then, rather than trying to avoid it and hoping it goes away, which a lot of men do. But then this comes down to the man's nervous system, and has he practiced enough that when her storm rages, he can actually just breathe through it and be okay, and not turn into the 7-year-old adaptive child version of himself. So we both have work to do, and it's this something that I see a lot in the work that I do, is this idea that I wish he was more masculine and I wish she was more feminine, and we wait for the other person to do the thing that they need to do before I do the thing that I need to do, rather than who do I need to be, which will inspire her or him to change into the best version of themselves.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's hard because you have one version, which is the feminine feeling wildly unsafe. So then she puts on these masculine shells and becomes really hard to live with, like rigid, critical, all of these things. Alison Armstrong is one of my favorite authors, and she talks a lot about the women's responsibility in not turning princes into frogs, right? Like all of these behaviors that you do, and you don't even, like, you're not even aware of these little subtleties that are actually taking a good man and making him worse. So taking total ownership over your behavior and how you are affecting your man. And at the same time, you want the man to be in a leadership position, and he does have to recognize in all the ways that he is, even unknowingly, making her feel unsafe. So like stepping into that masculinity, and you can't sit there and blame each other, because you get stuck in this crazy 8 pattern and no one's going to get out of it. And I guess in all of these retreats that you've done, and I'm sure people are unbearing like their deepest, darkest secrets and like their biggest pains that they have, when you have a relationship that has been neutralized, and I wish there was a better word, and maybe there is, because it'll almost become like, it's like, so it's charged in a way, because it's so, there's so much animosity between the two people, but it's neutralized in the sense that there's no attraction. Like both people are just completely repulsed by the other one. And there have been so many ways that one person has let down the other person. So like the man hasn't led and the woman hasn't been soft at all or receptive or nurturing. So both people have fundamentally failed the other person. It's how do you know when that relationship is salvageable? Because you mentioned earlier in the conversation, like that's kind of what led you to this work, was your own marriage. How do you know it's salvageable versus like this is beyond repair?
It's a beautiful question that is, it's very case specific. The moment that we need our partner to be different is the first opportunity that we have to reflect on what we need to do differently. Because if our partner is a certain way, then typically it's because it's just a reflection of where we are at. The work that, men come in, and often it's a dynamic from childhood where a girl grows up with a father and she can't trust men. She can't trust her because of the way that her dad was, or because of a boyfriend, or whatever it was. But then because men or boys don't ever receive an initiation, a lot of them are mothered. And a lot of the time they don't trust their fathers also. In my case, I grew up not trusting men because I was beaten and bashed and betrayed and abused and all these things. So I was like, fuck men. I don't want to associate with them. I don't want to open to them. And it wasn't until I was deep in this work where I realized I still didn't trust men. Because I was disconnected from masculinity externally, I was disconnected from it internally. And I just kind of, I'm not going to be like that because that's unsafe. So naturally I met a woman that was more in her masculine. And then this polarity that we had in the beginning was incredibly sexy and beautiful. She took more lead, I took more of a seat, and it was just, this is the dynamic that we created, which was steeped deep in wounding and childhood wounding and all of these things. And the kind of the path that I went on, I started to realize that, yeah, sure, I've got this feminine emotional side, and I do really enjoy being in that pole, but actually my masculine pole is far deeper than my feminine. Mm-hmm. So the more healing I did, the more that started to switch. And then I started to realize that a lot of these relationships that I'd been in were just not working. Mm-hmm. So often resentment will build and intimacy will fade when the relationships are depolarized. And if a person spends too much time in the opposite pole of their natural essence, they'll start to build resentment. Like, often women are doing the leading and the planning and the structuring and all of these things within the relationship, especially when they're kids, because naturally they step more into a masculine role with the organization and the planning and making sure everything is taken care of. And all children are feminine energetically, so they need containment. So they need a masculine structure that is going to contain the energy that they are, which is super beautiful. It just means that the man in the relationship needs to step up, and he needs to do more to contain now not just his woman, but the family as well. And often men, they don't realize that something has shifted energetically because they're not as attuned as the women are. So they're doing the same thing, and they're like, well, suddenly why is the sex dried up in the relationship? And then the relationship might be depolarized and there's no intimacy, and then he'll complain that she's too much in her head, or she's too planning, she's too controlling, she's all these things. And then she complains that, why isn't he doing more? And then suddenly the resentment starts to build, and it's a depolarized relationship. So to the question, if you can really do the work where you drop into you energize more your natural essence. So for most men, it is their masculine. For most women, and it's not always the case, but for most women, their natural essence is to be more feminine. Mm-hmm. The more you can polarize these two energetics, you'll start to see a shift in the relationship. And if it shifts in a way that creates desire and creates more intimacy in these things, then you'll naturally find out if it's a relationship that can be salvageable. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's not. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you're just like, actually, we've grown so far apart, there's been so much resentment that it doesn't matter how much healing you do, you just naturally kind of drifted away from each other.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that there is a limit? So talking about even neuroplasticity, the ability to fundamentally change, is there an age where it is almost impossible, I won't say impossible, but nearly impossible to create a really big shift in your personality or the way that you're presenting yourself? Because let's say you spend like 30 or 40 years with all of these shells. Like, let's say your core is masculine, but you've kind of been presenting more feminine. And for most women, like especially millennial women, you've been living masculine, but your core essence is feminine. But there's just like your armor is so thick. Is it much harder to do this work and to kind of take off of that armor or those layers, like at 30, 40, 50, 60? Is there an age where you're like, you're going to need psychedelics for this, or you're going to need some really intense therapy coupled with, maybe retreats or like inner work, whatever it might be, a library full of books of Alison Armstrong and David Data, or do you think it's possible at any age? I think it's possible at any age. Yeah. I think the deeper the patterns and the deeper the karmic kind of, the karmic pattern that puts you onto that path, the deeper that is, the more difficult it's going to be for maybe a 20-year-old compared to a 50-year-old. Mm-hmm. And the opposite can be true. For me, it was the realization and the deeper awareness of like, oh shit, I read David Data for the first time and I was like, oh fuck, that's why all of my relationships failed. Yep. Same. And it was it's like, oh, that's so simple, it's so easy. And then
you share it with somebody else, and they are so against the idea that this is how it could be. That, no, that's bullshit. That's misogynistic. That's wrong. It's okay. So at some point, they may come around and they may soften to the idea that this concept, although they might not agree with it fully, they might not agree with the wording. At some point, they might start to realize that there is another way. They just need to loosen their grip of how they need the world to be okay. And the way that this younger generation is being guided to, there are no genders and you can be whatever you want to be, and it's like, sure, see how long that lasts. Because yes, we are equal, but we're not the same, and we're not meant to be the same. And you know, I had somebody write to me and say, well, this is bullshit. Why do I have to pay for her meal? And why do I have to open the door? And why can't she just do that for me? Or why can't we do it for each other? So you can. But, you know, it is the complete opposite of polarity. And without the polarity, there's no desire. And without desire, it's a fucking boring relationship. And it's going to end in resentment, because that physical intimacy is a nourishment that we all need. And whether it is just touch or cuddling or sex or soul fucking, whatever it is, we need some version of it. And if you're not going to polarize the relationship because you're stuck in this belief that the masculine feminine dynamics are a patriarchal construct and fuck men, then, you know, good luck.
Yeah, good luck. Yeah, that was one thing I've been seeing a lot, and maybe it's just the spaces I've been finding myself in. It's these men that don't want any responsibility anymore. Like they'll parrot that men are the leader and like the better of the two sexes and all of those talking points. But then they say that, you know, feminism means that we're the same, so they're no longer going to be chivalrous or be a gentleman or open up the door. And I point out the hypocrisy, because if you're going to be a leader, then the external shouldn't be influencing your principles and how you show up and your value set system. It's, do I show up with respect? Do I believe that women are valuable? I mean, like, without our wombs, we literally don't exist. So you might not like the behaviors that you're seeing. And I would even try to highlight that a lot of these extreme women that are awful, that you're seeing it more because it clicks well, like it's clickbait, it feeds the algorithm. I don't truly think that is indicative of most women. Just like when you see these really shitty men, I don't think that that's indicative of most men. Like, we're seeing the extreme worst of each other because that is what feeds this big machine. So if you're going to show up as the man that you say you are, like, whether or not feminism is annoying shouldn't really affect you as a man if you're strong and principled. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's too much focus on the external and what other people are doing wrong, and, well, they're like that, so I'm not going to do this thing, and it's part of the uninitiated generation of men, or generations of men at this point. And part of these retreats that we lead, it's like coming back to the truth of who you are, and what does that inspire in your life? And where do you want to get to? What would you want to do before you die to be able to die complete? And then to have this vision of life and to have these core principles and these core values and to create a life that is so inspiring and so magnetic that actually people want to follow you. And you're not controlling and you're not dominating anybody, because they can do they can do whatever they want. But your life is so beautiful and so rich that they're like, ooh, actually, that is inspiring. And it's inspiring in a way that is in service to others. And this is the other thing, because of the way that so many men are these days, they follow people like Andrew Tate because he has money and he has women and he has these things, and for them that is inspiring. Sure, but the guy's a piece of shit. Like, he's not in service to anybody but himself. So for me, that's not inspiring at all.
And then I would say that's not a leader either.
100%. It's a guy that is so wounded and so, you can go into his pathology, but it's the surface level the external things that you spoke about before, like, oh, if I get a car, that's going to fix me. If I get the woman, that's going to fix me. It's like, no, man. No, you need to go inwards, and you need to excavate the pain that you're feeling. And you need to be seen in your pain, and you need to release it so you can actually get to the truth of who you are. And that truth is going to birth something in you that is going to create for you a life of purpose and meaning. And purpose and meaning is one of the things that most men don't have, because it's not really highlighted how important it is. But the moment that your life has purpose and meaning, everything shifts. And then everything becomes about what is in service to that. And one of the greatest differences between the healthy masculine and the unhealthy, or the mature and the immature, or man and boy, is, are you in service to something greater than yourself? Mm-hmm. And the responsibility that comes with that.
Yeah, I think it's an incredible point. We've mentioned rites of passage a lot, and I would love to know, what age would you suggest that a parent kind of create some kind of ritual for this for a young boy? And then what does that look like? Like, what are some modern takes of this? Because I think most people, especially moms, are not going to give a green light to you, doing a walkabout with nothing but like a little blade, and there's like wild boars, and you might not get your son back, because that's kind of what it used to. It's like literally you had to risk death for a rite of passage for it to be an accurate one. But I think that there's some modern iterations that can be a little safer but still get the point home.
I love that question, and I love the emotion of which you asked it, because you have two boys. Mm-hmm. And one of the most detrimental things for a boy is his mother's inability to set him free into the world for risk of his safety. Mm-hmm. And actually Jordan Peterson speaks really beautifully about the sacrifice that a mother needs to make. Mm-hmm. And he references Mary and Jesus and all of the Mother Mary and Jesus and all of these things. And it's one of the issues, one of the reasons men rely on their girlfriends and their wives to mother them, is because they haven't disconnected from their own mother, and they seek that nurture that they grew up with from their mother, because she would never let him go. Mm-hmm. 7 is the first age where a boy's brain starts to shift from like, mum is my world, to what about men, and what about these men that I see around me? And they look for this download of this masculine transmission, whether it's from a father or a father figure or from other men. They get more curious. So about 6 or 7 is the first one. And what that can look like is simply more responsibility, and actually acknowledging to him that he's no longer a little baby, but he's becoming a boy, and he's becoming, in a few years he'll be a teenager, and he's going to require more responsibility. So actually emboldening him with tasks that he's never had before, to give him the sense of pride and of, oh yes, I can do this. Traditionally, a rite of passage, there needs to be an enrollment. So the person needs to sign up for it and want to do it. There needs to be separation. So they need to be removed from community or society or whatever it is. There needs to be an ordeal. So whether that is go off with a knife and spend a few days by yourself, or it doesn't have to be that intense. But basically you need to enter liminal space. You need to enter this space where your brain is open to the idea of things not being the way that you once thought they were. It's kind of, you're not here, but you're not there, and you're in this very malleable place where something can shift who you are fundamentally. That can happen through dance, through drugs, through sex, through fasting, through many, many different things. And then there needs to be an integration. So once you are integrated back into the family or back into community or society, people see you as different. And one of the things, you might leave home and you go away, you go traveling, you have all these experiences, and you come back and nobody sees you as different, because because you've had these experiences and you've changed and you are different, nobody actually sees you as any different. So although you've gone through your own rite of passage, there's no integration. And this is one of the reasons why, as an adult, your parents will still speak to you and see you as a child rather than the adult that you are. So the rite of passage doesn't have to be as intense or as physically demanding as they used to be. But traditionally it's because there was this killing of the boy, this symbolic killing of the boy, so the man could rise up and could enter into a new phase of life. And the more the risk of death, the more powerful the initiation. I was 33 and I was like, fuck, I still don't feel like a man. Like when I think I was 8, and I remember thinking, wow, when you're 20, you have life figured out. And then I was 20 and I was like, okay, maybe when you're 30, you have life figured out. And I got to 30 and I'm like, fuck, I don't even know if I'll ever have life figured out. So I set about traveling the world looking for initiation. Like, how do I put myself through an experience where I finally feel like a man? And it wasn't until, and I did a bunch of different traditional initiations, but it wasn't until Sundance where I actually felt like I might die. And I was like, oof. And I put it off for 2 or 3 years. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. And the moment I did it, there was this palpable, oh, wow, that's it. That was the thing I needed. That was like the absolute fear of death, even though I was never going to die. The absolute fear of death and walking into that fire knowing that I might die was the thing that I needed to really shift me on every level into manhood.
Do you think that those are equally as important for women, like a rite of passage?
Yeah. Yeah, women have the physiological menstruation marking in their life of, it still doesn't shift you emotionally into womanhood, but there are certain traditions where they do have the red tent and these things where women go through girls go through their own rite of passage. I think one of the most beautiful for women is motherhood. My woman just went through it, and I've never seen the power of a woman until she goes through pregnancy and birth. And holy shit, that is something that it's just, and then, my next door neighbor is a single mum. It's like, wow, to do this by yourself, it's just a whole new level. And
I can't imagine. I have so much help, and it truly does take a tribe. If you want to do it the healthiest way, right? Like in the highest elevation, you need help. I'm not saying like single moms don't do a good job. They do a great job, but it is exponentially harder. Good God.
I've been working on myself for 10 years, almost full time. And I was like, okay, I'm pretty good. Like, my nervous system, I have this shit dialed in. I have the tools, I have the technique, I know exactly what to do. I've never been pushed to my edge as I was in those first 6 weeks. And it's like, fuck, to do that by yourself. And then people would write to me and like, yeah, I've got twins. I'm like, whoa, that is a whole new thing. And then I think back to like my dad, who had no tools and his nervous system was not good. And it's like, wow, that, I understand why parents would shake their kid or like leave them outside or do all these things where you read about it, and maybe you don't have kids, but you read about it and you're like, oh, that's horrible. It's like, fuck, it is, but I totally get it. Like, it is a stress that I've never experienced. And I have an amazing woman by my side, mothering like an absolute champion, and I don't know how to do this by myself. So for single parents, it's like fucking hands down.
I'd also imagine it's probably easier for a single mom than a single dad, because we're quite literally wired to take care of that little screaming thing. And I think part of the reason that you go through so much pain throughout that process of, like delivery, is to get you ready for the psychological pain afterwards. It's the most ready nature can kind of get you to that. And I would remember with our first, the crying and the sleep deprivation. Like, sleep deprivation gets me. I need sleep so much. I'd kind of get delirious, but I wouldn't get to the point where I would want to like physically hurt the baby. And then my husband would be like, same thing, I understand why people shake the baby, because like there is this rage that will come over him when the baby was crying. And I'm like, oh my God, I've got this. He's like, I'm not saying I'm gonna do it, but I'm telling you, it's like it's overwhelming. And part of that is maybe threat. Like, right, like if we were back in the woods or like in the jungle and you have this crying baby, it is a threat to the tribe, because now everything knows where you are. So maybe there's an element of that. I'm not really sure, but I think the nervous system is the major part, right? If you're operating dysregulated, then this added an additional stressor, and it's going to break, like you're going to pass that threshold of what you're able to deal with and not.
Exactly what you said. I think the pregnancy prepares the woman for birth, and the birth prepares her for motherhood. Men don't have that. Mm-hmm. So suddenly we're just like kicking along. Life's great. Woman's pregnant. Things are good. You got to provide more. But then, boom, you are holding this thing. You haven't slept. I used to live in Berlin. I used to party a lot. Mm-hmm. Sleep deprivation. I was like, don't worry about it. It is a whole new thing. Mm-hmm. To wake up every few hours for an hour, and then to do that on repeat constantly, day after day. So that's the part that really fucking shook me. Mm-hmm. But then to be stretched emotionally, and to not have slept, and then to have this like alarm just like screaming at you and shitting everywhere and vomiting on it. It's so beautiful in that it forces you to expand. Mm-hmm. But one of the deeper realizations was like, no wonder there are so many single women, because men just don't have the capacity to handle it, and they just eject because they can. And perhaps that's what their dad did to them, because they could. Whereas the mother, it's a different thing. It's obviously the connection is far deeper for so many women. And it's like, okay, now I get it, and I understand like why so many people have trauma, because it's so easy to traumatize a baby simply by not being there, or by putting it down and walking away because you need to take care of yourself and all these little things. Then suddenly you have an adult who's slightly fucked up, and it's like, yeah, but imagine what happened to them as a child because their parents couldn't be there for them.
Because you would have had so many other people to hand the baby off to, right? It was never supposed to be one person. It was certainly not supposed to be two people. There was supposed to be extended family, tribe, community. So everyone's like, how are you supposed to shower or go to the bathroom or like eat a hot meal? And like hot food is so important during the healing process for a woman. So there's all of these tropes of women like, oh, my food, I finally get to eat and it's cold. Well, like that actually helps heal your womb, is eating like nourishing hot food. So yes, the mom has a ton of needs after birth, and we don't prioritize her at all. It's just about the baby, and she's just got to figure it out. But she was supposed to be being cared for by usually her mom or her grandmother, and then if she needed something, the baby would be passed off to like another woman. And I think because we don't have that, like, yes, I think part of it is men hitting the eject button. This is too hard. I'm not regulated. I can't do this. But I think also women blame the man for not being that tribe of women because he's not supposed to be. Right? Like, he would have been hunting. So we have designed our families in a way that we think that we want, but we kind of have to consciously ask ourselves, is it working? Is this the highest elevation of like what a family can be? Or no wonder the divorce rates are what they are, or why we have half the population walking around with an unhealthy attachment style. It's because it's not working. So maybe we need to like make some tweaks, whether that's you hire some help, or you consider moving closer to family, or you develop relationships with, oh my God, I'm going to say your neighbors, like learn their names, right? Like develop the community that is going to help you thrive. I don't know I don't know that your husband is ever going to be enough during that process. And I think if you put all of that on him, it is going to be a recipe for disaster, which is why you see so many people talking about this roommate phase that happens after birth. And I'm curious, as you being a new dad and being like a leader in this space, how do you navigate the early months of newborn baby, still work, still have like a polarized relationship with your woman? I saw this post that you did and it just made me melt. She's cooking and she's wearing the baby and you walk up behind her and you grab her by like the neck, and it is just like this, it is like, it's perfect. I'm like, that is polarity in a video, and you like chef's kiss. It was so beautiful. And the thing that I think set that apart from, because a lot of men will be like, oh, I do that, or I'll smack her butt and walk by, is like the presence that you see in that clip that you're demonstrating. I was like, this is how it's done, fellas. This is amazing. Like, you are there with her, and it was so beautiful. So tips for all of the men, all of the women that are either in this stage of life or considering going into it, like, how do you do this successfully?
I love that you brought that up, because that stirred so much shit, that video. Of
Really?
Like, why wouldn't you take the baby off her? Why does she need to cook? All of these
I
things.
loved
It's
it.
like, it was like a 23-second clip without the context. And some people loved it, and some people were so fucking triggered by it. But basically, you know, I used to, before I had a child, I used to speak a lot about polarity and new fathers. And some new fathers in the men's workspace would be like, yeah, all right, you just wait. I was like, okay, I will wait. And I will wait with the knowledge that this is probably not going to be exactly the way that I think it is. But also with the knowledge and the tools to know what I need to do. And the first piece is that when a woman becomes a mother, energetically she becomes more masculine. So if the man doesn't do anything differently, it's automatically depolarized. Mm-hmm. So that's the first piece. The second piece is she is stretched physically, emotionally, everything. Like from the pregnancy to the birth, she's not feeling good. And if all she's feeling is this graspy, needy, well, what about me? Why won't you fuck me? It's just going to close her up, because she doesn't need another child. She's just got a new one. But she doesn't need that energy of that teenage, like, man, what about me? She needs somebody that is safe enough and wide enough to be able to gift her the space and the love that she needs. The other part is, you know, if you look at the physical poles, you know, I don't want to get super woo-woo, but you know, we all have the 7 chakras, and then they switch for men and women. So the positive pole of a woman's yoni her yoni is a receptive pole. The man's cock is his positive pole. And then it alternates all the way to the heart, and the woman's heart is her positive pole, and the man's heart is his receptive pole. And the simplest way to speak to that is that for a woman to be turned on physically, you need to open her heart. For a man's heart to open, you need to turn him on physically. And the way that it happens is that men know that we get turned on. We are more connected. Our heart is more open when we are making love or when we're turned on. So we'll go for a woman's genitals because that's what we need. Whereas a woman will go for our heart because that's what she needs. So we're doing this opposite thing. And the simplest thing for a man to do is to actually just open his woman's heart through emotional intimacy and through asking her what she needs, and from having really deeply beautiful and meaningful and sometimes vulnerable conversations. And the more that you can pour love into her heart and open her heart, the softer she's going to be and the more she's going to be able to relax. So, and the other piece is semen retention, because if you are constantly ejaculating and ejecting and losing your energy and your virility, you're not going to be able to hold energetically enough to be able to press it into her in ways that make her feel loved. If you're walking around depleted energetically, then she's going to feel that, and she's just going to feel you as another burden. If you are full and you're taking care of yourself and you are not ejaculating and ejecting, she's going to feel that, and she's going to feel, and this is, the scene in the kitchen is when, for a good chunk of that time, of the first couple of months, I was absolutely retaining and full. So she feels me energetically from a different room, and she can feel my desire being pressed into her along with my containment. So she feels how much I want her and how much I desire her, but she feels my capacity to not get needy and not kind of grab and take. So I spent a lot of time in the first couple of months, like, we'll have these relationship check-ins, like, my love, what do you need? Where are we at? What's the thing that, where could you use more of my support? Is there anything you need to unburden your heart? Like, things that are really creating a space for her to share what she needs without me needing to take anything from her. And then maintaining a polarity of doing what I can so she can relax and she can do the things that she needs to do. So building myself energetically, creating emotional intimacy, just pressing love into her as much as I can, reminding her of how beautiful she is and how much I desire her. Because, the physical change and these things that women go through in pregnancy, they often feel like, I've lost my beauty, or I've lost my attractiveness. But for me, it's totally the opposite. To see a woman go through that, it is the biggest turn on to see her power, to see her in her power. So to express how much I love her and how much I cherish her and how beautiful she is, and to maintain the polarity and to give her the space to speak openly and emotionally. And our relationship is, when he sleeps in between us, it's obviously not as sexy as it used to be, but I've spoken to couples that after the birth, it's been 1 or 2 years and they still haven't had sex.
Wow.
And that's challenging for both.
For sure. How do you remain connected or tethered to that person without that? Because to me, that's one of the main things that differentiates your relationship from anyone else, right? Is that romantic and erotic charge that is there.
I understand that some women go through such an experience of birth that they just cannot physically have sex. And then at some point, for me, after that long, there's going to be some kind of a resentment, because probably neither partner are getting what they need. I mean, one of the simplest questions you can ask yourself is, what is your partner's love languages? And I ask so many people, men and women, they're like, oh, fuck, I don't know. So, okay, so you can be pouring love into them.
It's not being received.
And it's not being received because it's not how they receive it. So you can be giving, there's one couple, he was buying her everything and giving, she had his credit card, and this is how he grew up. This is how he received love. So this is how he thought she received love. And she's like, I don't fucking care about the gifts. I just want him to spend time with me. And he's like, well, I'm buying her everything. Why isn't she receiving my love? And it's that exact thing. Just because you receive love in a certain way, it doesn't mean that's how they receive it. So if you can figure out, I had a partner years ago, her words of affirmation was her love language. And I was in such a state. I was like, well, fuck that. I'm not going to give her that because she's just insecure. And now with Sarah, her love language is words of affirmation. It's like, okay, how can I blast her every day with genuine words that just make her knees shake? So every time she comes into the room or we wake up, I'm like, all right, what's the truth of my heart in this moment? Oh my God, you are so fucking beautiful. I love where your hair is messed up and you walk into a different room and you sleep in your eyes and fucking turn on so much. And at some point she's just like, oh, okay, And I love it. I really, it opens my heart to see her and to feel her receive love. And for me, that's like, why would I not do that? Why would I not be so generous that the mother of my child just does not feel almost flooded with love every day?
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to doing things to like take stress off of the plate and to help during, I mean, just life in general, but I think it's just playing at expert level when you introduce a new baby. Are there things that a man's going to do that are going to depolarize that can be seen as helping? So that was also one of the critiques on my video, was these men saying if they're caught doing anything domestic, that's automatically going to depolarize the relationship. How does that work how does that work in general? I don't subscribe to that, to be clear. I don't think that that's a thing, but I think the house is for everyone to maintain, especially if both people are working. But how does that work in general, let alone when there's only two parents in a house and there's a new baby?
I'm interested, who are these people who are commenting this shit?
Well, I don't know how familiar you are with like the quote red pill space, and it's truly black pill if we're being honest. But like Rollo Tomasi, what's his name? Andrew Wilson, his wife, I'm forgetting her name. They're terrible people, all of them, especially the Wilsons. But they're saying that it'll automatically create like an unhealthy dynamic between the relationship, and that it's like turning a man into like a domesticated dog, essentially, and that the woman is supposed to take care of everything in the house. And I'm like, sure, that if that works for like the dynamic that you want, like a very small snapshot of humanity, which was like maybe the 50s out of the, hundreds of thousands of years we've been on this earth. But I would say that's not physically possible when there's a new baby and there's only husband and wife, because I mean, you're bleeding for 6 to 8 weeks after, right? Like, you're not supposed to lift anything heavier than your baby until you're done bleeding. So like, how does laundry get done, or meals prepared, or anything cleaned if the mom physically isn't able to lift anything?
One of the common misconceptions from men is, well, I provide. Mm-hmm. I provide financially, so that's all I have to do. It's like, no. Providing financially is great, but you need to provide safety. You need to provide emotional safety. You need to provide a space for her that she can let go and soften and not have to do anything. Because the first 2 to 3 months, you don't want her doing anything. And a really beautiful idea that I came across at some point was, she takes care of the baby, and then you do everything you can to take care of her so she can take care of the baby. Because you're not breastfeeding, you're not going to be, depending on the situation, whether you're bottle feeding or whatever, most of the time the woman is going to be waking up with the baby, and then you're going to be sleeping, and then she's going to be exhausted, and then you want her to get up and fucking do the laundry and cook the dinner and do all these things as well. I don't agree with that. And if you have the capacity to get help to do that, sure. But whatever it is that takes away her need to think about the mundane. And this is why planning and creating structure is such a masculine thing, because it allows her to just kind of let go. When she's in her head, she's more in her masculine, and she's trying to organize and do the things. Automatically you're depolarizing the relationship. If she's in her head for most of the day, because that's the situation that you've created for herself, all of the things that she has to think about to do, you're depolarizing the relationship. The more you can get her into a body so she can feel, the better the relationship that you're going to have. So if you can create space, the easiest thing to do is like, my love, I want to take you out for dinner tonight. Oh yeah, but what about the kids? Don't worry, I've organized the babysitter. Okay, but I've got nothing, there's a dress on the bed. Oh yeah, but what about, no, I've run you a bath. Like, you take care of the things so she doesn't have to think about it. And suddenly all of these things that she had in her mind, she just lets go of, and she softens. And then she can relax. And then you're going to start to get the truth of who she is and the radiance of who she is. And the more space you can create for her to soften into that, the more polarized the relationship will be. we have an agreement in our house that she actually loves cooking. She's fucking amazing at it, and she loves it. And for her, it's a meditation.
Mm-hmm.
So she's like, I'll do the cooking. I'll absolutely do the cooking all the time. Any kind of housework, maintenance things, garden work, it's mine. Like I love it. I'm good at it. I'll do it. No problem. So there is this natural thing that we are more magnetized to do.
Mm-hmm.
If she is better at, hypothetically she was great at mowing the lawn and she loved it, then sure, she could do that. It's just not the way it is.
Right.
So it's not necessarily finding these gender roles and being rigid and sticking to them, but it's doing the things that actually feel good to both of you. And the more you can take off her plate, especially in the first few months after she's given birth, the better she's going to be, the better the relationship will be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I think that is a great point and example of the man planning the date and making sure that childcare is lined up and the reservation is made. I can't tell you how many moms I've met through just like play groups and, like mom's dinner night out, and everyone's kind of sharing their experience or their struggles within their marriages. And a lot of it was shocking to me that when you bring up the 2 years, like to some people that might sound crazy, but I met a mom that hadn't gone on a single date with her husband in 2 years yet. That was my second dinner date with her, and we had just met. So it was odd because when I would ask the question, like curiously, how have you not gone on a date with your husband in 2 years? And she would just say, oh, I can't get childcare. I'm like, that's just odd because you're prioritizing this right now because you're here. I mean, I'm assuming the husband was watching, so that whole like childcare thing is probably a little bit of like anxiety, fear, neuroticism, like no one else can watch my kid. But there are plenty of ways that you can find someone who's like verified, vetted, a close friend, a cut. Like there are ways to get someone safe to watch your child. And I think if you have a woman that's really hesitant about that, because it does, pregnancy and just motherhood in general can really mess up some women's brains, like neurologically, and they'll become like hyper vigilant on anything that they might perceive as a threat. So I think that's a really good opportunity for a man to kind of come in and provide like some sense of security. And like I personally took care of finding childcare. I checked her out. She's safe. Let me take you to dinner. Because again, if you don't do things that set that relationship apart from every other one, you're going to end up with a roommate. And I believe, just based off of people's ability to deal with pain and do the work and consider that there's room for them to grow, I think if you let it get to a point, there is a point of no return. Just because, not because it's not available, because there's so many tools, but just because we get in our own way, or that story becomes so deep, like those patterns get so deep that the cost of starting over with someone else or just like maintaining the status quo is going to be less than actually doing that painful work to like rewire those patterns within that relationship, or to take that distorted filter of our partner off, right? Because we've been so convinced that that's who they are, and we keep telling ourselves, like you mentioned, how integration is such a big part of the rites of passage for men, right? So part of that would be, society taking off that distorted filter and saying like, no, this is now who this man is. And I think we do that with our partners as well. Absolutely.
We have this, our pathology helps create their pathology. So a very common thing is like, I need my man to be more present. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, before what? Well, before I open up into my radiance, I need him to be more present. Mm-hmm. So, okay, but what if you opened into your radiance and that inspired him to be more present? Rather than waiting for him to change so you can change, why wouldn't you just change yourself? Mm-hmm. But we have this dynamic of like, well, I can't do it until they do it. Mm-hmm. And then this is the pattern that gets deeper and deeper. Mm-hmm. And it really makes, it makes it far more difficult to change the habit of relationship until we take that accountability. And I'm a firm believer that we are 100% responsible for everything in our life, including the way that our partner is. Because if I was a different way, my partner would be incredibly controlling and incredibly insecure and all of these things because I was a certain way. Mm-hmm. But I've learned to be a different way. And that different way has created an incredibly beautiful nourishing, polarized relationship with a woman, and we have a 5.5-month-old kid. So how you show up is going to dictate the quality of your relationships without having to wait for your partner or rely on your partner. But yeah, that takes our own work and our own accountability and our own self-reflection, which is, I think it's just one of the most powerful traits to have in relationship, is the capacity to self-reflect and to be like, oh, fuck, you know what? That's mine. This projection that I had on you, like, you know, I found one the other day, and again, I've been doing this work for so fucking long, and there's new stuff that comes up. But there was this anxious piece that I realized came from my childhood. Like, my parents would project anxiety onto me, and then I would close down because I felt their anxiety, and then suddenly this arose in the relationship, and I was like, ah. And I came to her, and she allowed me the space to share what I was feeling and to share my frustration. And then through that sharing, I was like, fuck, this has nothing to do with you. This is my shit. Wow, what a beautiful opportunity to then, you know, the next time this happens, rather than say, oh, this is your fault, it's like, actually, this is just me. And I get to change that because I now have awareness of it. So yeah, self-reflection and 100% responsibility they're really powerful tools.
So I find that we tend to, like, secure people find secure people, and anxious people find avoidant people. It is just like the world of magnetism and how we seem to find each other. So given that roughly 50% of the population is in one of the insecure attachment styles, so half the population is operating from one person's anxious, one person's avoidant, when one of the parties starts doing personal development work or polarity work, we'll start with the man. How do you show up in a way or set a boundary, which I think is probably going to be the first step with your woman who has all these masculine shells. So let's say, this is an example. I had so many people that were tweeting this the other day. They're like, no, I do all of these things, and I do help around the house, and I buy the gifts, and I take her out, and I'm like doing these things, and they're not noticed, they're not seen, they're not appreciated, and I still get yelled at for like the one thing I missed, right? So the woman is stuck in this masculine critical stage, or like this emasculation pattern that she's in. What is a good way for a man to help like discharge that, disarm it, or like set a boundary to help her get into at least awareness that she's in this sharp critical space?
Beneath every complaint, there's an unmet need. And if the woman's complaining, and we're just, oh, you never take out the garbage, or you don't do this, or you don't do that, and we're focusing on the thing that she's complaining about, we're missing the gold. Because it has nothing to do with the garbage. It's probably got to do with the fact that she can't trust you, and that hurts. So rather than, you know, the quintessential masculine practice is to become energetically wider than what is happening. So when the baby is screaming, rather than being like, oh, fuck this baby, it's like breathing deeply and becoming wider than it. So whatever is happening in your experience, you have awareness of it without identifying with it. So if she's complaining, rather than attaching to the complaint, it's like, okay, fuck, she's in pain. Okay, what is the thing beneath the complaint? Maybe she doesn't feel loved. Maybe she doesn't feel seen and heard. Maybe she doesn't feel like she's a priority. So rather than like, oh, well, I did the garbage yesterday, it's like, oh, my love, you know what? You're right. I didn't do the garbage. And actually, it's not the first time I haven't done that. And you begin to take accountability. And then suddenly she starts to feel heard. And, you know, the worst thing we can do as men is defend. Oh, no, but I did this. It's like your adaptive child kind of taking the steering wheel. And of course she's going to feel unsafe if you're defending, because she's not feeling heard and seen. So you take accountability and you validate what she's saying, and you validate her experience, and you empathize with it. It's like, fuck, that would hurt if I lost trust in you because you weren't doing the things that you said you would. And I totally get that, and I'm so sorry. And I'm going to try 200% that this is not going to be the pattern that I have in this relationship. And I may fuck it up again. but I'm really aware of it now, and I'm going to shift because of this awareness. Taking accountability, validating and empathizing, and allowing her to feel seen and to feel heard is going to often at least neutralize that complaint. But then really exploring and creating the space. Is there anything else? Is there anything beneath that you want to share? Is there anything that you need to say? Do you have any resentment? I did this practice with Sarah at some point where it's like, give it to me. Give me your resentment, and I'll sit here and I'll breathe through it. And there'll be no judgment, there'll be no defense, there'll be no anger. I'm creating this space for you to just release the resentment that you hold. And it's fucking hard to hear as a man, all of the things that you've done wrong and the ways that you've dropped her, but it's also a beautiful practice. And if she can clear her vessel of these things, at some point they're going to dissolve and they're going to be gone, and she won't bring them up again. But we often don't allow women the space to release what they're holding on to. So there's always the residual thing that suddenly you didn't do the thing that you said you would, and this thing that happened 3 months ago comes up again because it was never fully let go of.
So flipping to the woman, you had a really good, slideshow kind of it on your Instagram, and it was the feminine and 32 ways to anchor into that. And I thought that was really great because it's really easy to point out like how men need to improve and where they're like quote falling short. And I get criticized for only talking about that, even though it's not true. Like, go through my episodes or my content, I'm like, I'm way harder on women. But what are some tips for like women to go into more of that feminine space, or to stop kind of operating in a masculine shell, or like to get out of turning like your prince into a frog, essentially?
Seeing the king in him is a really beautiful one. It's so easy to complain and to criticize and to shame his little boy. And that's all you're going to get. The more you point to that, that's all you're going to get. The more that you praise his king, you're going to start to get more of that. And it is so easy to criticize and to complain and to do all these things because he's not doing it right. And sure, and there's this really beautiful... This is an example. Okay, look around the room right now and look for everything that you see that is brown. Now close your eyes. And now tell me all the things that you see that are green. It's not so hard. It's not so easy.
Right.
But you open your eyes and now look around the room for all the things that are green. And it's like, sure, there's actually quite a bit. And you'll see that the things that you saw that were brown, some of them are not actually brown. Maybe they're a bit more maroon or a bit more black, but you're trying to succeed in your mind. So you're looking for things that could be brown. And it's the same thing. Like, if you're looking for the reason to complain, if you're looking for the reason he isn't conscious enough, if you're looking for the reason he's not good enough, then you're going to find it, even if it's not actually there. And if you flip it and you look for the reason he's a king, you look for the reason that he is such a good man and that he is trustable, you're going to start to see more of it. That's the first thing. The second thing is revealing the truth of your heart in every moment. And that is such a powerful and beautiful gift to the man, even if it's difficult for him to receive. If he receives your complaint, it's like, oh, fuck, really, again? Like, this is, she's always complaining. If she receives a deeper, my love, it fucking hurts me so much when you don't do the thing that you said you're going to do. Like, it really, I feel myself just like, oh. And maybe there's a tear that comes because you're truly feeling the depth of the pain of not being able to trust your man. That is going to land so deeply. And he's going to be like, oh, fuck, actually, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize how much that hurt you, but now that I can feel that is such a more powerful thing than a complaint. Allowing yourself to express, like to feel joy, to feel pleasure, to feel all of these things. And it's so easy to get caught up in our heads and all the things that we need to do and the planning and the structuring, but to just create space for yourself, whether it's 10 minutes a day or 2 hours on a weekend, whatever it is, to allow yourself to drop in to feeling and to just fully expressing through dance or pleasure or whatever it might be for you. This will start to really charge that feminine pole. And so many women get caught up in the fallacy that their physical beauty is the thing that attracts men. And it's really not. It's their radiance, and it's the transmission from their heart and from their body. And I had this experience years ago where I met this woman that I wasn't really physically attracted to her, but I was so fucking magnetized by her that I couldn't keep myself away. And I was like, what is it about this woman? Like, I mean, she's not that good looking, but holy shit, she's so magnetic. And she was a Tantra teacher. Mm-hmm. And she had spent years and years training her radiance and expressing her radiance. And it was like a fucking magnet. Mm-hmm. And I just wish that women would take the effort that they put into making themselves physically more beautiful and put it onto their expression and the truth of their heart, and to really tap into those textures that they don't allow themselves to. Mm-hmm. And it would shift how they are received. It would shift the imprint that they have on the world mm-hmm. in such a more beautiful way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I highly recommend people go check out that slide, because all 32 were amazing. And one that resonated with me a lot was the express your feelings more than what you think, like how you feel, because I can get really heady, and I was even just doing like a rough audit, and I was like, all my examples are I think, and I'm like, oh, he's right, that's absolutely masculine, and a part of that is it's a shell, right? It's a protective layer, because I don't want this to come out, because I'm like, well, if I feel and then he doesn't respond in the way that I want, well, now I'm hurt. Where if it's I think, you can kind of swat that away a little bit easier.
And what would happen if you did express what you feel? Like you said, doing like this, whatever it is, whether it's pain or whether mm-hmm. there is a gift, there's a texture in that expression that is going to land so much more deeply. Mm-hmm. And yes, you're opening yourself up to pain, but you're opening yourself up to a depth of love that you may not have experienced. Mm-hmm. And this is the fucking path. This is like, am I willing to put my heart on the table to experience a love deeper than I've ever experienced before? Or am I actually just going to go in protected and armored because that's safer? Mm-hmm. And that's the, it's your gift to your man, and it's your gift to the world, is the truth, moment to moment, of that. And I guarantee that if you share with him the absolute depths of truth of your heart, he'll receive it in a way that you may not expect. Mm-hmm. But you need to give him the chance. And we so often we hide from our partners because we have this fear of how they're going to react. And one of the deepest fears for women is this fear that I'm too much. Mm-hmm. And the deepest fear for the man is that I'm not enough. So we go through wearing these masks and this armor and just living these very inauthentic expressions of ourselves. And the work that we do, especially the co-ed work, it's like you get to sit in front of a woman who expresses her deepest truth, not just the I'm seductive and whatever, but it's like I'm in so much fucking pain, and the openness that brings to a man to actually feel a woman in the depths of her pain is so powerful and it's so healing.
Mm-hmm.
And we just, not enough people get to experience this. So the greatest gift you could bring your man is to just be like, hey, can I share this with you? I don't need you to fix me. I just need you to see me in this. And to just, wow.
Mm-hmm.
If it's from the heart, it's magic.
Mm-hmm.
It's so beautiful. If it's from here and from anywhere else, then it's just not as powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very true. The one thing I wanted to end on was, what do men wish women knew? Because this is a very popular talking point, and it's such a trope because it goes back to like, men are from Mars, women are from Venus, and we fundamentally are doomed to never understand one another. And I think that there is a bridge, right? And it's just when someone speaks, like, have that openness and come from a filtered place where it's like filtering through your heart. So like, what do men wish that women knew about men?
There are a lot of things. I think the biggest one is to know that we're not the same, and we don't do things the same, and we don't want to do things the same. We're not meant to do things the same. If you have an issue in relationship, do you need to process, or in any constellation of human, do you need to process with someone else or by yourself?
I like to do it by myself.
Okay. A lot of women need to process with someone else.
Mm-hmm.
So, especially with their man, like, hey, we've just gone through this thing, we need to talk about this. I definitely need to do it by myself first. My woman also needs to do it by herself first. Most of the time, men process internally and women need to process by talking about it. So actually in Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, he speaks about the idea that there is more oxytocin released for a woman when she starts to express with somebody and she gets to talk about it, and then suddenly she starts to feel better and she's less stressed, and then, okay, I've got it out. Whereas for the man, the more he talks about it, the more stressed he gets. So if the issue is about him and she needs to talk about it, that's for her benefit. Whereas he's just getting more and more stressed because she's talking about the things that he hasn't done right, blah, 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 and it just spirals. So to allow the other person to figure out what the dynamic is and what each person needs, and then to allow them the space to be able to do that. And often, again, this is from the man, it's like, you said before, the attachment styles kind of attract each other. They also create each other. So if you have an avoidant man, he's probably going to create, even a secure person, he's going to create an anxious person because he doesn't speak about the thing. He avoids the conversations that are difficult. He's not forthright in what is needing to be shared. So he'll create anxiety in his partner. If you need space to be able to process, rather than just, tuck-tailing and going to a different room and turning on the TV and going in your own little world, it's like, my love, I need 20 minutes. I need time of no demand where I can just sit there and fucking numb out. And in 20 or 30 minutes, or, ideally less than 24 hours, whatever it might be, I'm going to come back and we're going to have this conversation. And then that creates a safety for her because there's a structure. It's not like, I don't want to talk about it, and then she's kind of left hanging. So the one of the big ones is how you process things, and knowing that the other person is not wrong, they're just different. Men are incredibly sensitive, but we deal with it in a different way. And I made this real, like I think if you took how much a woman feels and you dialed it down to about 10%, you're going to get what most men can feel. So the way that we perceive the world is different. So if I'm feeling something, if a woman is feeling something, I'm probably not as a man. And you can feel something in the field, you can feel something within me, and if I haven't expressed it, I don't know that you can feel it because I haven't told you about it, so why would you be able to feel it? So you can feel that I'm going through something, and I think you have no idea because I haven't told you. The opposite, a lot of the times women will feel something expecting their man to be able to feel it. So she'll give him the silent treatment, thinking or believing that, well, he should be able to feel it because I'd be able to feel it. So there's a miscommunication. Whereas he's like, well, great, she's silent, so I'm fucking good. I don't have to do anything. And she's like, why isn't he coming to me? Why isn't he asking me about how I'm feeling? So knowing that men and women feel differently. Men have the capacity to feel. For 200,000 years, we have killed and maimed and hunted and done things that actually it's probably been more beneficial than that we numb ourselves from feeling the depth of what we can. But for women, who are the nourishers and the communicators and the nurturers of the family, it was more important that they feel more deeply. So we're just different in that way. And again, it's not wrong, it's just having an awareness of what the other person is like and where they're at. And the way that we express ourselves, like it's just, there are certain ways that, there are certain things that we need as men. Time of no demand, I mentioned before. Mm-hmm. It's not that I'm avoiding life. It's not that I don't want to have the conversation. It's not that I don't love you. It's not that I'm loving you less or I'm angry. It's that I need space to go and be by myself or to numb out or to be in this zone where nobody needs anything from me. Masculine burden is a real thing, and there is so much that we need to take care of, and there is so much that we have going on. And you know, if a guy comes home from work and he's been at work all day and he just needs to sit on the couch for 20 minutes, he may actually need that as a form of nourishment. He should also tell you that, like, hey, my love, I need 30 minutes or whatever to sit down and to just be in my own thoughts. But it's not because he loves you less. It's actually because he needs to nourish himself so he can give you from a full cup and not from depletion. Mm-hmm. There are many. Mm-hmm. But the underlying thing is that we're different and we're not meant to be the same, and he's not wrong or he's not doing it because he loves you less. But actually it's just because these differences are what create a more beautiful relationship.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite ways to kind of shift the automatic assumption that a lot of women have when a guy comes home and just like sits on the couch or he does something and the very first thought that she has or the first emotion she has is kind of negative or critical, it's to always assume the best. Like always assume that there's a really good reason that he's doing something and then filter it through that. So if he was doing this for the best reason for the family, the best reason for himself, why would he be doing that? And then search for those to make sense of it. And then you can invite him to like explain why that behavior is happening instead of like criticizing it or correcting it. So like inviting some explanation from the best possible assumption, and I think that you owe your person that.
Exactly. And that's that seeing the king in him and not just the complaining. And then ask for what you need. It's, you know, men are not mind readers, and there is an assumption that we should be able to figure out what you need, and this creates so much miscommunication and frustration. And you know, my love, I see that you're busy or I see that you need to just chill for a moment. No problem. I would love for you to take care of the kids when you're done. I've been with them all day and, you know, I'm exhausted as well. And how much time do you need? I don't know, 30 minutes. Perfect. That's perfect. And so after 30 minutes, I'd love for you to take the kids. And then there's just clarity, and men need clarity. You spoke before when you mentioned that you say, I think a lot. if you want to know how a man feels, ask him what he thinks about something, because we are very rational, very heady creatures. If you ask him how he feels, you're not going to get an accurate answer most of the time, because he doesn't trust his feelings. His feelings change all the time. His mental state, his ideals, his values, it's all very clear and very structured, and that's not going to shift. It shouldn't shift. The older he gets, the more settled in who he is he becomes. Ask him what he thinks about something, and you'll get a far better answer than, hey, how are you feeling? Just because how I'm feeling, I don't trust, is often the deeper response.
Well, I loved this conversation, and again, I appreciate you coming out. I know that you had a very busy couple of weeks here. Before we wrap it up, do you want to tell everyone where they can follow you, how they can support you? I know you have some seminars coming up. You can plug all of those, and we will make sure we link everything below as well.
Amazing. Yeah, so there is another retreat for men only coming up the beginning of May, the 2nd to the 5th in Austin. And then in Florida, at a place called Chosen, which I believe is between Orlando and Miami, we have a couples retreat for men. It's a co-ed retreat for men and women, 23rd of March. So if you're a man or a woman, or you're a man and you want to get the experience of healing and deepening intimacy and polarity with women, then the event in March is really beautiful. There's another one happening in Ibiza end of May, which is for men and women. But if you're a man that wants to experience life in a deeper way, then I highly recommend coming to the event in Austin. It's something that you'll never regret, and something that will change your life quite drastically. So otherwise, you can find me on Instagram.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you again. And then before you guys leave, if you can hit like, subscribe, and give us a 5-star rating. If you know anyone that would like this episode, please share, and we'll see you next episode. Bye, everybody.